Hi loves, you are welcome to Olives. If you are new here, my name is Olivia, and in today's video I will be making a tiered skirt, a 3-tiered skirt actually. And if you would like to make one for yourself, do continue watching and learning with me. I'll be using this fabric in this tutorial as well as just 1 yard of lining. I'll also make use of roughly 2 yards of 1/2 inch elastic band. The fabric is also 3 yards, and for the lining I'm just going to divide it into 2. This will allow me have more to pleat. Okay, let's move on to calculation. The full length of my desired skirt is 22 inches. And the length of my band is also going to be 1.5. So I'm going to take 1.5 inches from my length, which is 22 inches. Okay, so I'm going to have 20.5 inches. I don't want to work with decimals, so I'm going to approximate these 20 inches to 21. So subtracting 1.5 from 22, I have 20.5 inches, approximately 21 inches. The tiers are going to be 3, and I'm going to divide my new length, which is 21 inches, by 3. Okay, so I will have 7 inches as each length of the 3 tiers. So I've sketched out my tiers, and the first one is going to be the first tier, second tier, and the third tier. And the length of each of these tier is 7 inches. Okay, this is without allowance. We will need 1/2 inch to join the waist of the first tier to the waistband. We will need 1/2 inch at the lower part to join to the second tier, as well as the lower part of the second tier to the third tier. I'll increase each of these length by 1 inch. Okay, so first tier plus 1, second plus 1, and all gives me a total of 8 inches. Moving on to the width of each of these tier, depending on the amount of fabric you have. Okay, so for instance, my waist for the first tier, my waist times 1.5 inches. Okay, and the second one will increase, so we can gather the second one to the first one. So that will be my waist again times 2.5. okay, and the last one is going to be my waist times 3.5. This is just a simple explanation so you can understand. Okay, so it means that you can actually change the trend, so it can be 2 inches from the beginning. All you have to know is that as it increases, the multiplication should increase so that you have more fabric to gather to join to each of them, if I'm making sense. Okay, so with this explanation, I want mine to be a bit more, so I'm going to multiply my waist, which is 28 inches, by 2, and this gives me 56 inches, which is for my first tier. Okay, so the second one is going to be my waist again, which is 28 inches by 4. Okay, whatever you do, make sure it increases, so by 4, and this gives me 112 inches, as well as the third one, my waist times 8. You can actually do waist times 2 for the first one, times 3 for the second one, and times 4 for the second one. Remember, depending on the amount of fabric you have, okay, and what you also want. And if you take a close look at my total results, you realize that there is a trend. Okay, the first one is 56. 2 times 56 is 112, and 2 times 112 is 224. Okay, remember, you can do as much or as less as you want. I also want to advise that if you have your fabric, try to measure your fabric with what you have in mind to do and see if it will reach before you start to cut. Okay, I've cut out my fabric, and this is the first one, which is 56. Okay, unfold is 28 inches, and double of that is 56. The second one is also 112 inches. Okay, I had 100 inches but I needed 12 more, so I had to cut another part to join to the 100. And finally the third one, which is 224. This is actually really much. Like, it's much. It's really much. Anyway, so the ones that have like those cuts and join, I'm going to join them together with 1/2 inch for all of them. Okay, before I start to join, I'll cut out the waistband, which is also going to be the same width as the first tier. So I'm going to place the first tier onto the fabric like this to just mark out the width. So the length of my band is going to be 1.5 inches, right? I am going to add extra 1/2 inch to this 1.5. I'll be stitching 2 different rows on the band to create casing to insert 2 different bands. Okay, so for ease, I added 1/2 inch, so that is 2 inches, and extra 1/2 inch for joining allowance. That's to join the waist to the band of the waist to the first tier, so that is 2.5. Double of that is 5 inches. That means it's going to be on fold. Okay, so I'll have it on fold like this, and it will also match with the first tier. I'll move on to pin it together like this. That is the first tier, so I can have a round effect. I'll repeat the same thing to the second tier. If there is any cut and join anywhere, this is where I'll join all of them together. Then after doing this, I'll begin to gather. Okay, so I'm going to gather the top part of the second tier. We are not going to temper with the first tier yet, so I'll be gathering this with my domestic machine gathering foot, and this is how it looks like. We also have the industrial machine gathering foot. If you have that, you can also use it. Okay, and if you don't, you can just make 2 rows of gathering stitches and gather. Before I start gathering, I'll change my normal foot, okay, and change it to the gathering foot. I will also loosen my tension to the very last one, which is 0. Most machines use 5. Okay, I'll also change the stitch length to the longest one and begin to gather. This is me gathering the top part of the second tier. Since the machine is already in the gathering mode, I'll go ahead and also gather the top part of the third tier, which is the last one. There is one thing I like about this gathering foot. It allows you to rearrange the fullness or pull the gathers again even after you finish. So with this, even after gathering, you can arrange it so well that it will fit the measurement you want. Okay, so this is the first gathering, which is the second tier. Now I will adjust the gathers to the 56 inches, which is the first tier. Okay, so I'm just going to gather, and while I'm gathering, I will evenly spread the gathers. Now I'm done, and I'll try measuring to see if it's equal to the 56 inches I want. So I had a little that I had to gather again. So this is equal to 56. I'll bring in my first tier, and now I'm going to find the center of this first tier. Now I realized that I didn't add joining allowance of 1 inch, so after joining I had 55. It didn't affect what I'm working with, but you might want to add while calculating. Okay, so I'm going to recheck this to make sure that it fits the first tier, which is now 55. Now that I'm sure with the measurement, I'm going to bring out the other thread that was towards me, so I can have the two together and tie it like 3 times to secure so the gathers doesn't lose. Okay, so after doing this, I'm still going to evenly spread the gathers, because some parts are more and other parts are just less. I'll find the center of my gathers and also find the center of my first tier. So I'm going to pin these two together from the center point and also the joining part, which is going to be my center back. So this is what I have, and I'll pin round. I'll move on to stitch with 1/2 inch. This is how it looks after stitching. Hope yours looks like this as well. So the next thing is to also join the 3rd tier to the lower part of the 2nd tier. Okay, so I'm also going to find the center. With the center of my 2nd tier as well, I'm going to pin them together. I'm also going to join the back, which is the joining part, together. Then after doing this, I'll pin them round and stitch with 1/2 inch. After stitching round with 1/2 inch, I'll go ahead and knitting it round and hem the lower part of the last tier. If you have knitting machine around you, you can just knit in the joining part before joining the gathers together. Okay, so everything can be knit. After knitting, I use my steam iron to iron the 1/2 inch allowances upwards, not pressed but iron. So this is my band. I'm also going to join it like this with 1/2 inch. Press it open and fold it into 2 equal parts. So I'm going to mark like 1 inch on both parts of the seam line like this. Okay, so this is where I say I'm going to make 2 rows of stitches to insert the elastic band. Okay, you can as well make use of 1 inch band. Okay, so I'm going to mark 1/2 inch, which is the joining allowance first, and I'll use 1.5 cm for the remaining one, just 1.5 cm, which is more than 1/2 inch. Okay, so that the elastic band will have space to just pass through. So the top part will just be left out like that. So whatever marking I've done right now, I'm going to mark it around the band and stitch it, leaving this space that I've marked, the 1 inch on both sides of the seam line. Having stitched the band, this is how it looks like. I'm sure by now you've noticed that I've stitched the last row, which wasn't supposed to be so. Okay, that was a mistake, so I'm going to unpick it, otherwise I won't be able to join the waistband to the waist of the skirt. So after joining the band to the waist, it will create that last row for me to insert the elastic band. So with this, I'll pick one part of the band, okay, not 2 but just 1, and pin it round with the skirt, the waist of the skirt, and I've also added lining together with it. I pleated the lining so they are all together, leaving only one part of the band, which is going to help us knitting the band. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch them together with 1/2 inch allowance. This is how it looks like after stitching them together. I've cut out my elastic band. I reduced my waist, which is 28 by 3 inches, that is 25 inches. I've also cut out 2 of the same length. Now I'll trim off the excess of the waist so that by the time I turn the band in, the excess of the band in, the elastic will also have the space to pass through. Okay, so now after trimming, I'm going to flip or turn the excess of the band inside. At this point, I thought the camera was recording this. I basically folded the excess of the band into the band and pinned it together. So after doing this, I'm going to top stitch on the front part of the band. This is what I have. I've already top stitched with everything into the band. With the space I left at the center back, this space, that is where I'm going to insert the elastic band. Okay, so each of these elastic band that I've cut, I'm going to insert it into each of the rows, the spaces I've created. Okay, I'll pin my band together with a safety pin, and I usually use my teeth to just tighten the safety pin in place. So I'm going to insert it with the first one, leaving just the top alone. That will create that flower-like ruffle. So I'm going to insert it in the first row and then the second band into the second row. And while inserting, I'll pin the beginning of the band onto the skirt to secure the band in place. Okay, and then I'll continue to insert. Finally, this is how it looks like, and I'm going to backstitch on the band, the edge of the band, like 1/2 inch multiple times. And after doing this, I'll pull the excess into the band like this. Okay, and I'll restitch to close the opening I have. Okay, so I'm going to pull it this way and stitch. While doing this, try not to stitch on the band. This is how it also looks like having stitched them together, and the skirt turned out so nice. I really love how it turned out so much. I like it. This is how it looks on me. I hope you enjoy watching and learning. Hope you try it out. Do share with me on Instagram at Olives Creation or Olives, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Like the video if you really learned something from me today. Turn on your notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I would also like to know what you think in the comments section. I'll see you in my next one.